Picture this. You wake up tomorrow. Your phone has no signal. You open your banking app, it just spins. You drive to the gas station and the pumps are offline. You try to pay with your card at the grocery store and the cashier just stares at you. By noon, the shelves are already half empty. By evening, the power is flickering. And by the time you realize something is seriously wrong, it's already too late to prepare. Here's what nobody tells you: society doesn't collapse with explosions and warning sirens. It collapses quietly. And the people who survive it aren't the ones with the biggest bunkers or the most guns. They're the ones who understood what was actually happening, before everyone else did. So today, we're going to walk through exactly what happens, hour by hour, day by day, week by week, if society collapses tomorrow. And at the end, I'm going to give you the actual steps that could save your life and your family's life. Stay with me, because this gets very real, very fast. Let me ask you something, right now, how many days of food do you have in your house? Not what you think you have. Actually think about it. Walk through your kitchen mentally. Most people have 3 to 5 days. Some have less. And most people, when they imagine a collapse scenario, picture themselves calmly rationing food, protecting their family, making smart decisions under pressure. But here's the problem with that picture. It's built on a foundation of assumptions. And every single one of those assumptions is wrong. You assume the water from your tap will keep running. It won't, not after 72 hours without power to the pumping stations. You assume you can drive somewhere safer. You can't, not when every other person on your street has the same idea and the roads are gridlocked within the first 6 hours. You assume law enforcement will maintain order. They won't, not when officers are also humans with families and their own fear. You think you're prepared. You're not. And that's not an insult. That's just the reality of how modern society is structured. We've built a world so efficient, so interconnected, so precise, that it has almost no tolerance for disruption. Let me show you exactly what I mean. Here's something nobody talks about. Modern civilization isn't held together by governments or armies or money. It's held together by logistics. By supply chains. By timed, automated, just-in-time delivery systems that have been refined over decades to be as lean and efficient as possible. And lean and efficient is another way of saying, almost zero buffer. The average grocery store in a developed country holds roughly 3 days of inventory. 3 days. That's it, because holding more inventory is expensive. So instead, trucks arrive like clockwork, multiple times per day, restocking shelves automatically based on real-time data from checkout scanners. Now pull one thread from that system. Just one. Let's say the power grid fails. Not everywhere, just in your region. Let's say it's a serious cyber attack on the grid infrastructure. Or a major natural disaster. Or a cascading failure from an overloaded system during a heat wave. Within the first 60 minutes, here's what actually happens. Traffic lights go dark. Within minutes, major intersections become gridlocked. Emergency services can't move efficiently. Every hospital switches to backup generator power, but those generators are designed to run for 48 to 72 hours at most. Cell towers begin to fail. Most cell towers have battery backup for 4 to 8 hours. After that, they need generator power. Most don't have it. ATMs go offline. Digital payment systems stop functioning. Suddenly, cash is king, and most people have almost none. Water pressure starts dropping. Pumping stations are electric. Without power, water stops moving through the pipes. Within 12 to 24 hours, depending on your city's infrastructure, your tap runs dry. But here's the part that really gets to me. It gets worse, because all of it, is just the first hour. And it all happens because of a single disruption to a single system. Now imagine that disruption is nationwide, or global. There's a concept in systems science called a cascade failure. It means one broken part causes another part to break, which causes another, until the entire structure collapses, not from one big blow, but from a chain of small, connected failures. And modern society is the most cascade vulnerable system ever built. Here's why. Think about what happens to fuel within the first 24 hours. Gas stations need electricity to run their pumps. No power, no fuel. And without fuel, the trucks that deliver food stop running. The ambulances can't refuel. Generators at hospitals run dry. And every person with a car tries to fill up at the same time, causing lines that stretch for miles, causing accidents, causing road blockages. One broken link, the power grid, has now broken fuel distribution, food delivery, medical services, and transportation, all within 24 hours. Now add the human psychological layer on top of that. This is where it gets really important to understand. Humans under uncertainty don't behave rationally. We hoard. When people see empty shelves, they don't think I'll take what I need. They think I need to take everything I can, right now, because someone else will take it if I don't. It's called panic buying, and it's been proven in study after study. It happened with toilet paper in 2020. It happened with bread and milk before every major snowstorm. In a true collapse scenario, this behavior doesn't just happen at grocery stores. It happens with water, medicine, gas, batteries, anything that keeps you alive. And here's the cruel math. Hoarding behavior by 10% of a population is enough to empty shelves that were meant to serve 100% of a population for 3 days, in under 6 hours. Nobody talks about this mechanic, because it means that by the time you decide to go get supplies, the supplies are already gone. The window closes faster than you think. But it gets worse. And I know I keep saying that, but it genuinely does, because now we have a population with no food, no water, no power, no communications, and escalating fear. And the social contract, the invisible agreement between people that we will behave in an ordered, cooperative way, starts to crack. Studies of past collapse scenarios, from Hurricane Katrina to the siege of Sarajevo to the Argentine economic collapse of 2001, all show the same pattern. Within 48 to 72 hours of a severe disruption, civil order begins to break down in vulnerable areas. Not everywhere, not all at once, but it begins. Law enforcement becomes overwhelmed. Officers are humans first. They have families they want to protect. In a genuine, sustained collapse, police forces historically see significant desertion rates within the first few days, officers leaving their posts to go protect their own homes and families. This is documented. This has happened. This is what the data shows.
So within 72 hours you potentially have no food, no clean water, no power, no fuel, unreliable communications, strained medical services, and degraded law enforcement. And you are sitting in your home, probably with no plan, watching this happen. Let's say you survived the first 72 hours. You had some food. You had some water stored. You kept your head down. What does week 1 actually look like? This is the phase most people never think about, because the first 72 hours feels like a temporary emergency. By day 7, people start to realize this might not be temporary, and that psychological shift changes everything. Sanitation becomes a critical issue most people never factor in. Without running water, toilets stop working properly. Human waste builds up. In dense urban environments, this becomes a serious public health emergency within days. Diseases like cholera, typhoid, and dysentery, diseases we think of as ancient history, are entirely waterborne. They spread through contaminated water supply, and in a collapse, water supply becomes contaminated frighteningly fast. Medications run out. Think about how many people around you are on daily medication. Insulin for diabetes, blood pressure medication, psychiatric medication, anti-seizure drugs. In the U.S. alone, roughly 131 million people take at least one prescription medication every day. Within 1 week of a collapse, distribution of those medications stops. The human cost of that is staggering and almost never discussed. Hospitals become overwhelmed and then non-functional. Without consistent power and supply delivery, hospitals, even with their best efforts, begin shutting down non-critical operations within days. Elective procedures, then urgent procedures, then eventually only the most critical emergencies can be treated. And without antibiotics and surgical supplies being restocked, even simple injuries become life-threatening. But here's what I want you to sit with for a moment. All of this, the water, the medication, the hospitals, all of it is solvable. Humans have survived without these systems before. Communities have rebuilt. Societies have recovered. The question is, do you know how? Because there's a version of this story that ends with survival, with community, with rebuilding. And there's a version that ends very differently. The difference between those two versions comes down to what you know and what you do before the moment arrives. Which brings me to what I've been building toward this entire time. Before we get to solutions, because we are getting there, I promise, I want you to understand the month 1 scenario. Because this is where the real turning point happens. By month 1, 2 types of communities emerge. This has happened in every documented collapse scenario throughout history, without exception. The first type is communities built on fear and scarcity. They hoard resources, distrust outsiders, and organize around whoever has the most weapons or the most food. These communities are volatile. They burn through their resources quickly, and historically, they don't make it past 3 to 6 months before fragmenting. The second type is communities built on skills and trust. They organize around people who know how to do things, how to purify water, how to grow food, how to provide medical care, how to communicate, how to preserve order. These communities are stable. They absorb new members. They create trade networks with other communities. They rebuild. The difference isn't wealth. It isn't weapons. It isn't location. It's knowledge. And it's social cohesion, the relationships you built before the collapse happened. This is one of the most counterintuitive findings in disaster preparedness research. The single biggest predictor of survival and recovery in a collapse scenario is not what you have stored. It's how connected you are to other people in your community. People who know their neighbors. People who have practical skills others need. People who know how to lead calmly in a crisis. Those people don't just survive, they become essential. They become the core around which communities rebuild. And here's what's interesting. You can become that person, starting right now, without spending a single dollar. Let me tell you how. I want to pause here and say something that most collapse content never says. Humans are extraordinary. Every collapse scenario in recorded history, and there have been many, has ended the same way. Not with extinction, not with permanent darkness, with rebuilding, with community, with ingenuity and adaptation. The people of Sarajevo survived a siege that lasted nearly 4 years, the longest siege of a capital city in the history of modern warfare. They grew food in window boxes and parks. They organized systems of trade and communication. They maintained their culture and their humanity through conditions that seem unimaginable. The people of Cuba, when the Soviet Union collapsed and suddenly removed all foreign aid and imports, didn't collapse themselves. They adapted. They created one of the most sophisticated urban farming systems on Earth. They restructured their entire society around local production and community resilience. These are real humans, not special forces operators, not billionaire preppers with underground bunkers. Ordinary people, doctors, teachers, parents, grandparents. And they survived, and in many ways, thrived, because they understood something that we've lost in the modern comfort of always-on infrastructure. They understood that survival is fundamentally a collective act. You cannot survive alone. Not long-term. Not well. Human beings are social animals who evolved to cooperate. Every single piece of evidence from anthropology, psychology, and disaster research says the same thing. the most resilient unit is not the individual. It's the small, trust-based community. Now, here's what you can actually do. These aren't theoretical. These aren't fantasy prepper fantasies. These are practical, evidence-based steps drawn from real collapse scenarios, real disaster research, and real human experience. Step 1. Water. This is your number one priority. The human body can survive roughly 3 weeks without food, 3 days without water. Your first goal is to be able to access clean water independently of city infrastructure. That means storing a minimum of 1 gallon per person per day for at least 2 weeks. It means knowing where natural water sources are within walking distance of your home. It means owning a water filtration system, not a standard Brita, but a genuine filtration or purification system capable of removing bacteria and viruses. This is a $30 to $100 investment. It is the most valuable $30 to $100 you will ever spend. Step 2. Food. 3 months of non-perishable food per person in your household. Not 72 hours, 3 months. Rice, lentils, canned goods, dried beans. Foods with long shelf lives and high caloric density. This is not paranoia. This is the standard recommendation of every major disaster preparedness organization in the world. Most people have 3 to 5 days. 3 months changes everything. Step 3. Knowledge. Learn one skill that becomes essential in a collapse. First aid, water purification, basic agriculture, mechanical repair, ham radio operation, preservation of food, wound care, fire starting without tools. One real, practiced, usable skill. Not watched on YouTube once, actually practiced. This skill makes you essential to any community you join. Step 4. Community. This is the one nobody wants to do, and it is the most important one. Meet your neighbors. Know who they are. Know what skills they have. Establish informal trust before you need it. In every documented collapse, the communities that formed around pre-existing relationships survive better than those formed in the chaos of the crisis itself. Join a neighborhood association. Attend local meetings. Introduce yourself on your street. This costs nothing except time, and it may be worth everything. Step 5. Communications. Own a battery-powered or hand-crank radio capable of receiving emergency broadcasts. This is how you get information when digital infrastructure fails. Know the frequency of your local emergency management station. Know where your city or region's emergency broadcast points are. Information is power. In a collapse, knowing what's happening before most people do gives you critical decision-making time. Step 6. Physical capacity. You don't need to be an elite athlete, but you need to be able to walk long distances, carry weight, and function under physical stress without immediately breaking down. Regular walking, basic strength training, knowing how to manage physical injury without immediate medical access. This is about having physical options when other options disappear. Step 7. Financial resilience. Keep some physical cash accessible at home. Not your life savings, but enough to operate for several weeks without digital payment systems. Know where the value stores are in your community beyond money, skills, tools, food, because in an extended collapse, cash itself loses value and barter becomes the medium of exchange. None of these steps require wealth. None of them require leaving your current life. They require awareness. They require taking the first step from knowing to doing. Here's the truth about what we covered today. Society collapsing is not a fantasy scenario confined to movies and doomsday forums. It is a documented historical reality that has happened repeatedly throughout human civilization. And every time it has happened, the outcome was determined not by who was strongest or wealthiest, but by who was most prepared, most connected, and most knowledgeable. The version of you that watches this video and does nothing is the same version of you that wakes up on day one of a collapse, opens an empty refrigerator, and realizes the window has already closed. The version of you that takes even 2 or 3 of those 7 steps is someone whose options expand dramatically the moment the ordinary world stops working. You now know what happens in the first hour, the first 72 hours, the first week, the first month. You know cascade failure mechanics that most people never think about. You know psychological traps, the panic, the hoarding, the false assumptions, and now you can see them coming. You know what separates communities that survive from communities that don't, and you know what to do. That knowledge is yours. Nobody can take it from you. The question is, what are you going to do with it? Because tomorrow is not guaranteed to look like today. And the people who understood that, before everyone else did, are the ones whose stories get told. What kind of story do you want to tell?